Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Contemporary Islamic Issues on Huda TV. I'm your host, Arkham Rashid. On this episode, we will be speaking about the concept of free mixing and gender interactions in Islam. So I want to start off by welcoming and introducing my guest to you. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show, Sheikh Asim Al-Hakim.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah wa jazakumullah khair for having me.
Now, this series are quite interesting. You know, they're very short, so you don't get bored when you're watching them. It's not a long lecture, it's straight to the point.
Personally, I get bored when I watch me, so I don't know about you guys.
No, we don't get bored when we watch you, Sheikh. So let's start off with a very simple question. Can men and women interact in Islam?
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillahi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa man tada bihudah. I usually interact with my wife, with my daughters, with my mother, with my aunts. We have no problem in such interaction. So is this what you're referring to?
No, I mean, can non-mahram and...
non-mahram, meaning that women who are not blood related to me, whom I can marry if I want, or feel ill desires towards, in Islam, no, this is not permissible. Again, unless the interaction can be strictly defined and we can tell people what we mean by that. For example, if I'm walking down the street and there's a woman walking in the opposite direction, is this called interaction? Is it called mixing? If I go to the haram, the masjid of Mecca, and there are people in the tawaf and sa'i, they're performing umrah, they're performing the pilgrimage, they're performing their prayer. So is this interaction? If I go to the mall and I buy things from there and there's women and men all over the place, is this called interaction? No, it is not. So Islamically, this is okay. But if you're referring to something else, then please share it with me.
So let's break it down one by one. So how about men and women, for example, classmates studying together, issues like this, or a male teacher teaching women? Does there have to be barriers? What's the situation, interaction, for example, in education?
In education, the Prophet ﷺ gave us guidelines. So for instance, he said, إِيَّاكُمْ وَالدُّخُولَ عَلَى النِّسَى. Do not enter a place where women are there. This is a general rule. So one of the companions stood up and said, "O Prophet of Allah, what about al-hamu?" Which refers to the brother-in-law or the uncle of the husband, for example, the in-laws. So the man is asking about a situation. This room is filled with women, my sisters, my mother, but it also has my sister-in-laws, my sisters-in-law. So the man is saying, okay, can I enter that room? The Prophet said, or can I allow my brother to enter a room where my wife is? The Prophet said, Alhamu al-maut, that the brother-in-law, the in-laws are like death. If you want death to get to your wife, probably you would, but yeah, I'm talking generally speaking. If you want death to come to your wife, then allow your in-laws, your brother, your uncle to mix with your wife. So this kind of interaction was totally prohibited by the Prophet ﷺ. And why is that? Because Islam, generally speaking, governs the relationship between people. It governs their relationship between their Lord and themselves. So you and I, we have something in between us. Islam tells me how to deal with you. And Islam tells me how to deal with a disbeliever. Islam tells me how to deal with my father and mother. So it governs my relationships. Now when it comes to the genders mixing, it is human nature that there is a magnet in them, eventually. And shaitan is there, but you never know when it would tick. So he waits for the right moment. And when it comes, he seizes the chance and he takes it. This is why Islam prohibits this. Now, Islam doesn't talk to us as if we are wolves waiting to jump on a prey and eat it and hack it to death. But Islam knows that some of us might be. So Islam protects both genders. Islam protects the females as Islam protects the males. Because the female is there and the male is always the predator. Sometimes a brother would say, Akhi, I know myself.
Yeah.
I know myself. Definitely I'm not going to fall into Satan's traps. You know yourself, but do you know the other party? Do you know if the girl would not fall for you? So if we look at education, we find that in educational institutes, schools, high schools, colleges, there is a lot of free mixing. And always, whenever there is free mixing, there is premarital relationships. This is a beautiful word. Yeah. In Islam, it's called zina. It has to be like this. This is human nature. Without it, a man is not a man, and a woman is not a woman. So definitely Islam segregates between them in education for the well-being of the society, of the girls and of the boys.
So say I was to go to class and there's men and women in my class. How do I overcome the situation? Do I attend class or do I skip out on my education?
This is a very sensitive situation. The ideal answer would be that women and men are segregated.
Yeah.
So we have colleges, and there are colleges in the States that are strictly for women. But the majority is mixed. There are colleges, military colleges as well, that are strictly for men. So they even appreciate the concept and they know the dangers of free mixing. So this is the ideal situation, but it's not there on the ground, except in some Muslim countries, alhamdulillah, and in some non-Muslim countries, but like 1 in 1,000 maybe or more. The second situation would be to look at the person studying. So in Islam, if I live in Europe or in America, and my daughter says, I'd like to pursue my schooling, I'd like to go to college, I say, my daughter, in Islam this is not permissible, because I am obliged to support you and provide for you. If I die, your brothers are obliged Islamically and by law to take care of you and ensure your well-being. You do not need to study, you do not need to work, especially when the environment is not suitable for a Muslim girl to do so. So I'll give her homeschooling. I would not allow her to go to public schools, because we've seen what happens in public schools. Girls in their 12 years or 13 years of age losing their virginity, conceiving, having abortions. And this is not commonly discussed in the news because it's so huge and big, they don't want to portray this. They only focus on the Muslim countries and oppressing women and segregation. Why don't women drive in Saudi Arabia? Subhanallah. These are the only issues and problems we have. We have catastrophes in the Muslim world. We have so many big problems, injustice, but they don't care about this. All what they care about is these 1 or 2 topics
that are different from their culture and their understanding. So what would you say is the role of women in Islam then?
Okay, women in Islam are half of the society. So many times we hear Muslims saying that there is equality in Islam between men and women. This is wrong. There is no equality. There is justice. Equality means that they have to be both equal. And this concept is illogical. It's like my wife coming to me and say, hey, listen, we have equality in Islam. Next year, you get pregnant. So, excuse me, well, what is this? This is equality. Allah Azza wa Jal has created women and men differently. And this is why Allah says in the Quran, وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنثَى, that male is unlike or unequal to the female. They're different. They are created differently. Their body structure and powers and ability is different from one another. So what is the status of women in Islam? It is like the status of men, in the sense that they are accountable, they are ordered to worship Allah Azza wa Jal like men, they are ordered to pray and to be good citizens, and to be good mothers, and to be good wives. They have everything they want and need in Islam.
Now, Sheikh, I understand that women are not supposed to or don't have to do anything in Islam. Men are obliged, like you said, the father is obliged to provide for his daughter. If he's passed away, then the brothers are obliged to provide for their sisters. However, this isn't the case in the West, we can say. Many times you find Muslim sisters that are abandoned by their parents. Now, even though it is a religious duty of the parents and the brothers to provide for their daughters and sisters, it doesn't happen. So what does a woman do in this situation? She has to work. And if she has no education, how is she going to work? How do we deal with this situation?
Okay, now this is a lot of hypothetical issues. It's like saying, we know that if you're stranded in the desert and there's no food for you, you're going to die. So unless there's a donkey meat or a pork meat or something that is unlawful. So what is the situation? So, okay, in this case, we judge the situation as it is. But the norm in Islam, a woman has to be provided for by her father. The father is dead, her brothers. If she's married, her husband. If no one is willing to cater for her, to provide for her, then it's the community's obligation. All the Muslims, and I have so many sad stories from the US, from Europe, of women who were left stranded or accepted Islam, reverted to Islam, and have no one to provide for them, and the community has turned its back to them. This is unethical. This is totally un-Islamic. In the case, worst case scenario, if a girl or a woman is stranded as you've described, this is not the norm. If the community is not providing for her, in this case, she is obliged, she's forced to do the least harm possible. So yes, okay, she has to have education, no one to cater for her. She goes to school, but she segregates herself totally from the opposite gender. She either sits at the back, she doesn't free mix, she doesn't chit chat, she lowers her gaze, she abides by the Islamic dress code. But unfortunately, those who put these issues and these hypothetical questions, they make a scenario. So in order to do this, Sheikh, she has to go wearing her tight jeans and a blouse. In order to do this, she has to go to make up her hair and do her body care or manicure, whatever they call it. She has to do assignments. She has to go for the weekend to their friend's party so that she wouldn't be singled out. Now, is this Islam? So again, we cannot judge or brush the whole thing with paint the whole thing with the same brush. We have to look into each case and judge it accordingly.
And speaking of not, brushing the whole picture with one paintbrush or with one type of paint, I want to discuss the concept of how genders interact with each other amongst different Muslim societies themselves. But before we actually do that, we're going to take a short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Contemporary Islamic Issues. Now, before we went for that short break, we were discussing segregation and free mixing in Islam. And we spoke about the different scenarios in which a person might have to free mix or interact with another gender. And we said that when we come back from this break that we will get into how different Islamic and different Muslim societies deal with gender interactions. So Sheikh, if you look at the Muslim world, something that is not allowed in Saudi Arabia, maybe because of society, maybe because of Islam, will be allowed in Egypt or Turkey. It won't be looked at as, oh wait, this is what's going on here. Whereas something that would be allowed in Egypt might not be allowed in Turkey. So each different Muslim society or culture has their own sort of gender interactions, and all of them, obviously, you know, being Muslims, they claim some sort of interpretation of the Quran and of the Sunnah, and say, you know, this is how we look at it, this is how we interpreted the Quran, this is how we extracted from the fiqh and from the masail about the issues of mixing and gender interactions and how men and women should deal with each other publicly. Is this because of their culture? Is this because of their Islamic beliefs? What's going on here? How come it's different? If we say this is Islamic ruling, how come we find differences amongst Muslims?
This is a very wide topic. Scholars are divided into three types. Scholar of the Ummah, scholar of the ruler, scholar of the Millah, or the religion. Scholar of the Ummah is the majority of scholars we have, unfortunately, today, who adhere to whatever the masses of Muslims want. So it's like a show where he says, okay, let's open the phones. What do you want to hear? So I'd like to hear this song. I'd like to hear that clip. And he said, okay, here it is. And this kind of scholar adheres to the requests of the masses. So they say, let's have music halal. Okay, let me look in the books. No,
so
not good,
they
not good.
They start with the result they want to get to. So they start with the decision that music, we're going to make it halal for you. Let's look how we can do this.
That's exactly the case. And they find a lot of acceptance among the masses because they are...
That's what they want to hear.
Answering their queries and to what they like. The scholars of the rulers, and these are the palace scholars. So the ruler wants this, said, okay, no problem, I'd like you to make riba halal, no issues, it's halal, we'll just call it some other name.
Okay, so we can say the first two categories are similar, meaning they start with the end result already. So, for example, like you said, the ones that are for the ummah, the masses, they start with the result, we need to make music halal for the masses. The second group says, okay, we need to make certain thing halal for the rulers. So their audience is different, but they start with, they have the same sort of...
With a slight difference is that the first category, the scholars of the ummah, most likely they have fear of Allah Azza wa Jal, and they have true belief in Islam. However, they fall under peer pressure, society pressure, so they tend to give in a little bit. Unlike the scholars of the rulers of the palaces, they are paid for that. So these are, in a sense, full-fledged hypocrites in camouflage. The third type of scholars are the scholars of the religion, ulama ul-ummah, ulama ul-millah. So ulama al-millah, these people, they only adhere to the Quran and the Sunnah, to the religion, whether their father is happy with it or not, whether the ruler is happy with it or not, whether the society is happy with it or not. And this can be cascaded in all Muslim countries. How to know what is right and what is wrong? By going back to the Quran and Sunnah. For example, in most of the countries you've mentioned, it is knowledge that differentiates a real scholar from a false scholar. The Prophet ﷺ, without any doubt, prohibited the shaking hands of non-mahrams, of strangers, men and women. So I cannot go in and meet the president of a country who is a female and shake hands with her. This is totally prohibited. And even in the Pledge of Allegiance, when the Prophet ﷺ conquered Mecca, and the women of Mecca came to give their Pledge of Allegiance, they said, "Oh Prophet of Allah, give us your hand so that we can give you, in a handshake, the Pledge of Allegiance." He said, "My statement to one woman is like the statement to 100 women. I do not handshake with women." Okay, does this mean that the Prophet ﷺ is extremist, God forbid, astaghfirullah, or he doesn't like women? No. He knows his boundaries and he knows what he is legislating for his ummah, and that is why he said this. The Prophet said, ﷺ, it is best for a man to be stabbed in his head with an iron needle rather than to touch a woman who is not permissible for him. And this shows you that it is totally prohibited to shake hands with your cousin, with your uncle's wife, with your sister-in-law, because they are non-mahram to you. Now, having said that, this brings us to the conclusion that in so many countries in the Muslim world, you don't find this being practiced. So is the fault in Islam? Is the fault in their scholars? Or is the fault in their knowledge and their practice of Islam? Definitely it's the second and the latter. The scholars for not sharing and teaching their disciples through Islam, and due to the lack of knowledge, due to following or blind following their traditions and customs, this led them to go against Islam.
SubhanAllah. And one thing that you mentioned just recently is the issue of shaking women's hands and touching women that are not permissible for you to touch. On this issue, for example, what if somebody needs help? What is this? Does this fall under this wa'id shadid? This the Prophet ﷺ saying it's worse for a person to do this than to this punishment that will inflict him. So what if somebody needs help? Does the punishment apply to me if I help somebody? Somebody fell on the floor, or somebody needs help going up the stairs. What do I do in this situation?
Part of the greatness of Islam is that it fits all situations. So if a person is stranded in the desert, again, no food except this big chop of ham ribs.
So it's a quite good option in the middle of a desert.
That's what they think, people. But to us, this is detested.
Yeah.
We can't even think of it. But I know how the people think. They said, "Whoa, what a feast." Islam tells you it's permissible for you as long as you are at the verge of dying due to hunger. No, you are allowed to eat, but only the portion that would sustain your livelihood. Likewise, if I'm in the middle of the street and this old woman is trying to cross the street, there's no one next to her, there's no female to assist her, I can take her hand and lead her across the street. If a woman, and these are all hypothetical and emergencies, if a woman choked or had a heart attack and there's no one, it's a hypothetical question, and she needed mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, who would do that? So, not me. I'm not going to hell. Let her die. No. This is something that you have to do. Maybe you have to carry her. All of these are exceptions. Now we're talking about the norm. We're talking about free mixing. And the people say, "Akhi, you're male chauvinists." I think that this is what they call them.
Yeah.
And you have these issues against women, and there's nothing wrong in women barging into your office, sitting next to you, doing this. And Akhi, all of these things are haram. Allah Azza wa Jal had placed a number of barriers between the genders to protect them. And even those in the West, they don't admit it, but they see it. Even free mixing among the people in the US, in Europe, in Japan, leads to fitna, leads to sexual interactions that are not undesirable. Men cheating on their wives. So many people married to one. How long have you been married? MashaAllah, 30 years. And I am faithful to my wife. Though I have like 19 girlfriends, but I'm still faithful to my wife. What is this? Even evangelists, they call them, cheat on their wives. Those who preach and hold the Bible and call people to God, they cheat on their wives and they're caught red-handed with their hands in the cookie jar. Even the president of the US of A had cheated on his wife. I did not have sex with that woman, he said. But what is this? You have a gorgeous wife and you're a man of power because of the free mixing with the intern who happened to be Jew and who happened to be a brunette and his wife was blonde. Nevertheless, he committed an act that is totally prohibited in Islam and in his religion as well. Why did he do it? Because he did not follow the policies and the procedures. If the people followed the Quran and the Sunnah, he wouldn't have fallen into that.
SubhanAllah. Very interesting thoughts that you're sharing with us here. I want to thank you once again for coming on the show. Unfortunately, we're at the end of this episode, so we're going to have to end it here with these questions. But
we may, if you wish, continue on the same topic, because maybe we have to discuss how to put boundaries, or how Islam put boundaries to govern this issue.
We can actually do this. Let's do that then. Let's on our next episode we will speak about what are the boundaries set by Islam. In what ways does Islam moderate these interactions between men and women? So we'll do that, inshallah. Dear viewers, stay tuned for our next episode and don't miss out, because we will continue this subject of free mixing and gender interactions. And until then, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all. Assalamu